Okay, so what's the equation?
7 squared minus 63.
Now, when we're factoring this here, we need to determine if there is a greatest common factor, which is 7. So when we factor 7 out of 7b squared, we have b squared. When we factor 7 out of 63b, we have 9b. And 7 factored out of 140 would be 20. So once we finish factoring it out, we'll still have the 7 in our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. To find the sign, we look at the sign of the third term. If the sign of the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which in this case would be negative and negative. Now we look at the factors of the first and third term. Well, the factors of b squared would be b and b. Factors of 20 are 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Which one do we want to try first? 5 and 4. Now we can check it here. B times negative 4 is negative 4b. Negative 5 times b is negative 5b. And negative 4b minus 5b is negative 9b. And that's it.
So does that only work whenever,
being able to add or subtract the terms?
yeah, whenever it's like both positive or both negative?
It works mainly because the term in front of b is 1. We don't have another multiplication with it. Because if there had been, then it might vary on what we get a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Because then we do have to take that multiplication into account. But it does give us a good place to start. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. What's our equation? Equals 6?
Wait, sorry.
Huh?
Minus 6.
Minus 6.
They're on the same paper.
Yeah, like all the homework questions are on this, aren't they?
Yeah.
What?
The same homework papers.
What?
Now there is not a greatest common factor number-wise between the three, besides negative 1. So we'll factor the negative 1 out so that we get the number in front of t squared to be positive. And really all that's going to do is change the sign for each of our terms. So it's going to take it from negative 3t squared to positive. Take it from positive 11t to negative. From negative 6 to positive 6. Then we'll have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since the third term is positive, our signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. So we'll have negative and negative. Now we want to find the factors of the first and third terms. Well, 3t squared, we're going to have t and t. Factors of 3 are 3 and 1. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first?
I know, I would try to do that.
Now 3t times negative 6 would be negative 18t. Negative 1 times t is negative t, which gives us negative 19t. So, I mean, we could flip it, and if we flip it,
Wait,
there would indeed be a greatest common factor if we flipped it. So we'll need to do 2 and 3. Where's the 2 going to go and where's the 3 going to go? 2 is going to go with the 3t. 3 is going to go with the t. 3t times negative 3 is negative 9t. Negative 2 times t is negative 2t, which gives us negative 11t. So that's our final answer. Questions on this here? We're going to start solving by factoring. We're going to solve polynomial, these quadratics, by factoring. Now, the main way we solve by factoring is something called the zero product property. Now, the zero product property is not only used for quadratics, it's used in a lot of different areas, and it's actually very helpful. Now, the product, the definition of it is if the product of two expressions is 0, then one or both of the expressions is equal to 0. Well, let's look at it this way. If I told you that we had some value of A multiplied by some value of B equaled 0, what would the value of A or B be? One of them would be 0, because the only way we can multiply two things together and get 0 is if one of them is 0. That's the only way this works. So, we want to solve this equation by factoring our zero product property. And what we're told is that k plus 1 times minus 5 is 0. Well, we have two things multiplied together, that equals 0. So it means that either k plus 1 is 0 or k minus 5 is 0. If we have two things multiplied together that equal 0, one of them must be 0. At this point here, we can solve for the value of k by subtracting 1 from both sides, telling us k is negative 1. For our other one here, we would add 5 to both sides, telling us the value of k is So let's check it. So I can replace negative 1 with both values of k, and we'll see if this equals 5, or not 5, 0. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6. And 0 times negative 6 is 0. We can do the same thing with 5. So we'll say 5 plus 1 times 5 minus 5. 5 plus 1 is 6. 5 minus 5 is 0. Because?
There was like a song he sung, and it was like, he was like, yeah, that's how you spell it. I don't know.
You know what taught me how to spell the word monster?
Let's look at the next one. So we have two things multiplied together to equal 0, so one of them must be. So we're saying that either 2m plus 3 is equal to 0, or 4m plus 3 is. Now for the first one, what would we do first? Telling us that exactly, we would divide by 2. So m is equal to negative 1.5 or negative 3/2. Either one works. How about the other equation? Yes. Or negative 3/4. Now we could plug them in just like we did the first one, and it will tell us that these do indeed make the equation equal 0. Questions on this here?
So your answer would be that n equals.
Now the other way we could technically write this is we can say m equals negative 3/2 comma negative 3/4. I can write it as one statement. Define what value of m will make this equation equal 0. We're trying to solve for it. And for most all of them, whenever we're solving, even if we have something on the other side other than 0, we move it over, make it be 0, and solve.
I thought that goal was to get that to equal 0.
I thought it was 2.
I was really confused. I was like, that's not.
I was like, we are not doing this wrong.
So the reason we get it equal to 0 is because of the zero product property, the fact that whatever these two values, when multiplied together, will give us 0. So they have to be, one of them has to give us a value of 0. Not that the variable is 0, but when I plug negative 3/2 into 2m plus 3, that side becomes 0, which makes the whole equation 0. And the same thing for negative 3/4.
You know, who was it that was like, oh, the question for Clement, isn't it actually this? It was like, no.
That was like a lot of people.
Oh shoot, was it Anna Marie? She was like, oh, I actually know this, and he was like, no, she said it.
I think I did that last year.
Or was it like actually something? Or was it
They're out in the hall.
Practice for freshman year, I think.
I think it happens all the time. I forgot everything.
I remember. Oh shit, that was something. I remember Levi answering a billion questions. I remember going to that hotel and that one girl was like floating in the water. I remember that.
So here, do we have two things multiplied together to give us 0? No, we have three things added together, yes?
Yeah, I was so.
But we can rewrite it as two things multiplied together equals 0 by factoring. Because when we factor this here, so is there a greatest common factor between these three terms? Well, no. So of our two sets of parentheses equals 0. Two things multiplied together equals 0. Now, when we factor, the next thing we want to find is the signs. Since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. So plus and plus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. And x. Now we need to find the factors of 21, which would be 1 and 21. And that's it. Which one do we want to try first? We're trying to get to 10. Now we can check this here to make sure we get the correct term. And again, when we check these, I would check them off to the side. I would not check them underneath because just like the first one, we still have to solve from this here. So we want to leave room for that. X times 7 would be 7x. Because I'm not going to multiply all of it out. 3 times x would be plus 3x. And 7x plus 3x is, which is the middle term we want. Now, we could do the x times x, which would get us x squared. We could do the 3 times 7, which would give us 21. But the main ones we're focused on are those there. Now, because we do have two things multiplied together to equal 0, one of them must be 0. Now, to solve this here, the first thing we would do is subtract 3. It'll tell us x is equal to, I guess, minus 7 from both sides. telling us x is equal to -7. So the solutions for this quadratic is x equals -3 and x is equal to -7. And we could check this by replacing every x in the function with -7. So instead of x squared, we have -7 squared. Instead of 10x, we have 10 times -7 plus 21. Now, -7 squared is 49. 10 times -7 is -70 plus 21. Now, 49 minus 70 is -21. Plus 21 is 0, just like we wanted. And the same thing would be true if we did it with -3. Well, it actually works out that both of these will. And it's part of the properties of a quadratic. -3 squared is 9. 10 times -3 is -30 plus 21. Well, 9 minus 30 is -21. Yep. So either one of those sets of parentheses is going to cause the equation to be 0. No, only one at each time, because we can only have one value of x at a time. So it can't be -3 and -7 at the same time. It's either -3 or -7. You can't both sit in desk 12 and desk 20 at the same time. Like it's two separate spots. Really, we'll get there eventually, but what we're talking about is the U shape on a graph. And we're trying to see where it equals 0. What value of x will make the function equal 0? It's where it crosses the x-axis. And since it's a U shape, there is going to be two locations normally where it crosses. There's going to be two values. And the two values that make this function be 0 is at -3 and -7. But what I'm saying is they can't both coincide at the same time. Like if we're plugging a value in, I can only plug it in as -7 or -3. I can't plug it in as both at the same time. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. It's confusing, but not at the same time.
Yeah. Like I understand half of it, and some of it's like.
Yeah. Because all of these will have two solutions. They may not be unique solutions, because it could be that x is 2 and x is 2.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you still write it like x equals blank, comma blank?
Yeah, we can do that. So let's solve this one here. Is there a greatest common factor? 4. So we can factor it out, which would be x squared plus 5x minus 6. Now that we factored it out, we'll do our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Now we need to find the sign. Since the third term is negative, our signs are different. They're opposite. One's going to be plus, one's going to be minus. Now we need to find the factors of the first and third term. Factors of x squared would be x and x. Factors of 6 are 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. Which one do we want to try first? Last thing we're going to do is to check it. X times -3 would be -3x. 2 plus x is going to be plus 2x, which would give us -x. We could switch the 2 and 3.
If switched them, would that just give you a positive x?
Yes. And The only time that it would make a difference switching the constant terms, the 2 and 3 in this case, is if the numbers in front of x were something other than 1 or the same. Because since they're both 1, it's not really changing how we do that multiplication. If it was 2 and 1, it would make a difference. Because one of them is being multiplied by 2, the other is being multiplied by 1. Because if there's a different value in front of the two x's, then yes, it will make a difference. But here, since it's the same number, 1 and 1, switching them didn't make a difference. It just changed the sign. Here, x times negative 1 is negative x. 6 times x is plus 6x, which gives us 5x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Well, now we're going to set our two statements equal to 0. Now, the 4 out front, we're not really going to do anything with because there's no way to change it from 4. There's no variable I can plug in next to it. It's just a constant term, 4. The ones that I can really affect or make 0 are these two here because they have a variable x. Now for the first one, x plus 6 equals 0, we can. Minus 6 from both sides. Telling us x is negative 6. The other one we can. Add 1 to both sides, telling us x is questions on this here? Are you good with this here so far? We'll save that one for another day. I'm going to skip ahead a few.
Oh my gosh. It's not even
Yeah. So I want to look at this one here. One, two, three, or 4.
Oh, there's 4 of them?
Yeah,
Oh no.
that's number 4.
I think there's only 2 on Netflix. I've only seen those 2. Spy Kids is on Netflix.
And there's at least 4 of those.
Have you seen the redhead guy in Spy Kids? He's married to Megan Trainor.
Let's look at this one here. Now, what's different from this one than the previous ones? Well, there's 2 on the, it's not 0.
Yeah.
So to be able to solve this, we need to get this equal to 0. So we can add 9p to both sides. Now on the left-hand side, there is no like terms. So we'll just add it to the equation. So we'll have 3p squared plus 9p minus 120. Well, negative 9p plus 9p is 0. It'll help. According to number theory, we put them in alphabetical order and then order by powers. So the p squared, biggest power goes first, p to the first goes second, and our constant term goes last. And it does help, especially with factoring, because our first step in factoring is greatest common factor, which order really doesn't matter there. And there's a greatest common factor of 3, which would give us p squared plus 3p minus 40. Now, if we don't have it in order when we try to find the signs, when we look at the third term, because if we put the 3p last, we aren't looking at the correct third term. Now, in this case here, since the third term is negative, our signs are Negative and positive, they're opposite. Factors of p squared are p and p. Now we need to find the factors of 40. Which are 1 and 40, 2 and 20, Which one do we want to try first? 5 and 8. Which one's positive, which one's negative? Okay. And the last thing we can do is check this here. P times negative 5 is negative 5p. 8 times p is positive 8p, which gives us positive 3p. Is that what we wanted? Now again, the constant term is kind of done. We don't need to use it anymore because to solve it, our two things being multiplied together are p plus 8 and p minus 5. Okay? Probably. Thank you. Now for the first one, we would subtract 8 from both sides, telling us p is negative 8. The other one we would, telling us p is equal to 5. And that's it. Questions on this here? With the last three, I think doing one more would be good. Which one do y'all want to look at? Or the last two? Number 18. This one here? Okay. Now again, we need this equal to... So that tells us that we have 3v squared plus plus 28v plus 49. Because the 8v and 36v are like terms, so we do have to combine them. Is there a greatest common factor? No. So there is no greatest common factor. So we'll have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces equals 0. Exactly. Since the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which will be plus and plus. Now we do need the factors of the first and third term. Well, with our v squared, we would have v and the factors of 3 are 1 and 3, 3 and 1. Those are the only factors, so we need to plug 3 in one of the two places. No. Now we don't necessarily have to write the 1, mainly because 1v and just v are the same thing. Now our factors of 49 are 1 and 49 are 7 and 7. Which one do we want to try first? 7 and 7. Now we can check this here. 3v times 7 would be 21v. 7 times v would be plus 7v. And 21v plus 7v is 28v. Is that the middle term we wanted? Now that we have two things multiplied together equal 0, one of them must be 0. So we're saying that either 3v plus 7 is 0 or v plus 7 is 0. What's the first step we can do? Which will tell us that 3v is equal to -7. And then we would I3 telling us v is equal to, let's look at the other one. That's it. Questions on this here?
Or we just go to
That's it. Yeah.
what is it?
Homework.
Oh, homework. On the head four.
There's only